Hey, we're live, everybody. Woohoo! Or you got live, everybody. Also possible. Don't know. Okay, so we're going to be recording the podcast live today. It's all about 8 productivity hacks that I have built into my life in only the last 2 months. Like some of them I was doing before, but I've been getting really fairly relentless about focusing on one thing at a time and that sort of thing as we navigate all of the projects we have going on here, personal projects, growth of the coffee business, all of that stuff. So I'm going to tell you, if you want to comment on the, like live stream guys on YouTube, just please put it in all caps because I'm half blind and I probably should take my glasses off for this uh live stream. Hey, my little computer thing's not working. There we go. So yeah, good morning, Crystal. And look, it's my eyes. No makeup yet today. That wasn't on the list this morning, apparently. Yeah, so I'll be recording live, and sometimes I make a mistake, and it's a real pain in the butt to go back on an audio file and find the spot and fix the spot. So I usually fix it right as I go. For those of you who are thinking of doing your own podcast, that's a really good a habit to get into, because a lot of people waste a lot of time editing stuff that they could have just edited on the fly, and it takes 20 seconds or less, and 5 minutes to even find it on other, or you have to listen to your whole podcast twice. I mean, like, I'm listening to my podcast right now, right? I've already heard it once. Hi, Beth. Good morning. Okay, guys, I'm going to jump in now to recording, which means I pull up GarageBand and I turn off my speakers so I don't get the TikTok noise, and we go. Well, welcome everyone to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you want to live on your terms. Today is Monday, March 2nd, 2021. This is episode 402 of Living Free in Tennessee. I'm really excited we've made it this far. Way back when I started the podcast, I had no idea how long I would do it. I had no idea it would become such an integral part of my life. So it's kind of fun to reflect on that. And I think we need to gear up for a fun celebration for episode 500, because that's coming this year too. And that's pretty exciting. We've grown from, I had 82 listens on my first download, and then I had 14 on my second episode. And I've built to over 2,000. So that's pretty cool for me. And looking to double that this year if we can. So y'all can help me by doing that. If you share it with a friend, if you find a topic you really like, then you'll, share it with a friend, let them know why you like it. Some people end up sticking around, other people don't. But every time you tell a friend, it helps us grow this community that we're building here at Living Free in Tennessee. And the community has really been what makes this podcast work. Anyway, today I'm going to share with you 8 hacks for improving your productivity. And it's because my word of the year is balance. Over the last couple of months, I've taken a really good hard look at where I'm spending my time, where I'm wasting my time, why I'm wasting my time there. Because sometimes when you're wasting time, it's because you're just freaking exhausted and you're not taking care of yourself, right? And then you waste time because you just can't even. And when I run into a situation like that, I think, well, what could I have done differently today to not end up here right now, right? So I have found 8 things that have really helped me work smarter and get more done. But it comes at a cost. Everything comes at a cost, right? Last year, my word of the year was grow, and there was a whole lot of pain and suffering and not growing going on in the first part of the year. And then I made a decision to grow anyway, and we grew. And now, if I wanted to apply for that second round of PPP money, you have to show 1/4 of 25% loss. I can't. Not bad, right? It's not. I looked. I was like, I in no framing of any of my financials can I make that explain. Well, that's good, because I don't really want to be spending my business time focused on getting money from the government. I want to build a life I like. Okay, so grow really last year meant less personal time for me, and I don't think it has to. And so I was going to do grow for a second year in a row, and then I thought, you know what? I want to grow and have personal time. So I'm going to find that balance this year. And part of what I found out is I just have to stop and do things like I spent 3 hours going to the pool and swimming laps yesterday, which is something I like to do. I know I'm crazy. I like to swim laps, but other people do too. In fact, a whole bunch of other people did yesterday. Usually Sunday's totally empty at the pool. But I just had to stop what I was doing and it, just accept that some things weren't going to get done. And I think that's really hard for those of us who are productivity oriented and wanting to get things done. You're like, I can do one more thing. But if that one more thing is at the expense of yourself, then it's not really worth it, because you find yourself less and less fast about getting the one more thing done. And you could have just, taken your 3 hours to go to the pool and then come home and banged out your podcast notes, which is totally what I did. I wrote these podcast notes yesterday. So as I've tested different ways in January and February, 8 of them have really come to the surface. I don't know if these will last for the year, but it's all feeding into my 3 Things book. And that'll be fun. So we're going to dive into that today. Before we do that, though, I want to remind you, if you want to reach out to me, you can do it. Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com, or go over to livingfreeintennessee.com, click on contact and fill it out, and it comes to me. And then also this Saturday at 2 p.m., I'm going to be doing a webinar, which is pantry management practices. I'll show you some of the things I do here to keep myself from losing my mind and to keep my pantry working for me rather than stockpiling food I never use, right? So we'll be doing that. And if you want to sign up, it's free for members, $50 if you're not a member. And you just go over to Living Free in Tennessee, log into your membership, and there'll be a link there. This is where I stop and talk to you, YouTube. When I record these, I haven't done my website work yet. So after this, my next step is to do my website work. I am putting the registration link on the homepage, Living Free in Tennessee, for that webinar right after I record this. I should have thought about that before I did the YouTube thing, because I never know if y'all are going to jump straight over there and then be like, why is green bean canning there or whatever? Actually, right now there's a coming soon message. Anyway, so if you do want to participate in that webinar, registration will be up by about 12 p.m. Central today, because literally doing that before I release the podcast on the podcatchers and launch the page for that. Okay, I'm going to jump back in. With that, it's time for the first segment of today's show, and that's Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where we talk about this shocking concept. It always seems so simple to me, but it's not always simple, right? And that's storing what you eat and eating what you store. I think part of why this is hard is we don't want to admit what we eat. And we're going to talk about that on that pantry management webinar, that sometimes it's better just to admit that you eat what you eat, because you waste a lot of money storing stuff you don't eat. If you're like, I'm only going to put the healthy things away. But if you're not a healthy eater, then right before a storm, you're going to be running out and buying Oreo cookies or whatever it is your thing. If you already have a cycle of that, you can develop healthier relationships with the junk food in your life, because you can be methodical about it and realize maybe I shouldn't binge on that. And you don't have to run out to the store for the Oreos right before the bad weather hits. Okay. So this week has been, or this week being last week, was a use it up week. I was in town. I came back Tuesday last week from going to the fire on party. And then Wednesday, pretty much Wednesday through Friday, every hour of every day was booked. I was working furiously because I had to fit 5 days of work into 3 days. That's why I'm thinking about productivity today. And also, I've been staring in my freezer at this piece of meat that's about as big as a football. And it was a beef heart. And it's been there for 1 year. The last beef heart I had, I ended up giving it away. Well, the whole point of having the whole animal is figuring out how to use the whole animal, right? And I've had deer heart, love it. I've had pig heart, love it. Why wouldn't I like beef heart? It just seems so intimidating to dive into this football-sized piece of meat. So finally, I was like, Nicole, turn that frown upside down and face your fears. And so I grabbed it and defrosted it, and I did a bunch of looking, because I know how to cook heart. Heart is different than other organs. Like, I don't like how liver tastes. I don't like how kidney tastes. It's a giant muscle, and it has very little fat, especially if you're a nice fit bovine, right? So it's just like cooking very lean meat. And to cook a venison heart, for example, you thinly slice it. You slightly thin it, and then you just quickly sear it off and eat it. And it's you cook it rare, and it's really tender when you do it that way. You cut, not with the grain, but against the grain, really tender, really tasty. It's almost like it melts in your mouth. And a lot of people who hunt don't want the heart. So if you know hunters, you can be like, I'll take the heart. And then you have your one little meal of heart that two people can eat about, or one if you're really into eating all of that meat. And it's great. Well, I figured I could do the same thing with the beef heart, but I thought, well, I'll look around at other ways to do it. And finally, after looking, I learned about trimming the heart, because with the venison heart, there's not as much to trim. On the beef heart, when you get into the inner chambers, there are, extra veins and things that you want out because they're chewy. So basically, you cut off all the rubbery parts and the fat and the silver skin, and then you cut it. It comes out, when I did it, it came out in steaks when I did it that way. And then I hunked it up after marinating it in a Korean barbecue sauce that was paired with some soy sauce that was paired with some taco seasoning. So it was kind of like this meld of Asian and Mexican flavors. And then I sauteed that up real fast, and it ended up with this really rich broth in there that I just left in there. And we had beef heart tacos last night. Everybody loved them. Okay, so I had the two rednecks over for dinner because everybody who was interested in tasting beef heart could. And it was really good. The texture of the meat was a little bit less soft than, say, a filet mignon would be. And I think had I cooked it a little less long, it would have been better. So I cooked the meat all the way through. It was probably medium by the time I was done with it. And, the thing is, on those lean meats, you either cook them not very long or you cook them really long for them to end up tender. So we got but not so, it wasn't so tough that you couldn't chew it. It was just kind of like there's a little more resistance on the tooth than you would have expected for a piece. I mean, for the meat just looked fantastic. It looked better than any steak I've ever seen at the store. The color was really nice. It was really cool. And the flavor was just like steak would be, pretty much. It just kind of took on the flavors that I added to it. Tacos were great. And then I did what we do here. So one meal kind of feeds another. And I know a lot of people who don't like leftovers. We don't necessarily just reheat leftovers of whatever it is in my household. Sometimes we repurpose them. And I decided to repurpose what was left of the taco meat into beef heart stew, because I have a work crew here today finishing the carport for the workshop that we're putting up. We're getting a little extra hangout space that's definitely undercover in case it rains, and undercover in case it hots, because sometimes it's either going to rain or going to be hot. We don't know in April. It's kind of how Tennessee works. So I poured that into a crock pot, put a bunch of vegetables and other stuff to go with it, threw it in the fridge before I went to bed, and then took that out this morning so that at lunchtime we'll have beef heart stew. And then I let everybody know who's coming here. We're having beef heart stew. That means if you want to make a sandwich, because that sounds gross to you, make a sandwich. And I'm like, sorry, like you're just hitting me during my weird time of year where I'm using stuff up, but it'll be really good. The other way that I'd like to try beef heart that I haven't is something that my great grandma did. If you've listened to the podcast for very long, one of my favorite stories my grandma's told me, it was on a Christmas Eve or Christmas Day at my dad's house when she was well into her 90s. She grew up in the Depression. And her family at one point was going into the Christmas holiday and they didn't have any meat. So they were eating, vegetables or whatever they could. She grew up hungry, like sincerely hungry at times. And a neighbor slaughtered, I think it was a pig, but it might have been a cow. But I always thought it was a pig, and didn't use the heart. And actually at that time of year, it would make sense that we're slaughtering pigs. So they gave the heart to my great grandmother for Christmas to serve to the family, because they knew that the what was available to my grandma's mom and dad at that point was fairly meager. And my grandma's always like, well, my mom was Mennonite, and so she knew how to cook these sorts of things, as if that's a thing. Well, I guess maybe that is a thing. And it's funny because if you think about that time, like, we're coming from people who homesteaded on their way across the country, right? Their kids, my grandma, transitions into more of that during her lifetime, into that more 50s style of cooking where things are kind of coming out of cans and more there's a grocery store you go to, that sort of thing. But my great grandma didn't have that. And so what she did was trimmed it up, and then she stuffed it with different vegetables and grains and things, and she baked it, and they had this sliced up as their main dish, this sliced up pig's heart that was stuffed. So what I want to try next beef heart I get is to stuff it. And the part that's I'm not quite sure how to do is how to trim the inside of those heart chambers, because the trick there will be get the silver skin off the outside, get stuff into the center of it, while also making sure there's no rubbery bits, basically, because the blood veins are fairly chewy. And then baking that for a long time. So I'm next beef heart, which should happen. Actually, there's probably one in the freezer from the current cow, unless the one I just cooked was the current cow. Anyway, that's going to be what we experiment. We'll totally do video about that too and see how that works out. So just another way to cook beef heart. The stew today takes us from, not cooked all the way sort of beef heart that's still kind of tender to cooked for a long time in a stew so it's tender, right? The lettuce grow operation, I told you all a few weeks ago, I had some germination issues. It's teaching me more things. I've been so busy, I haven't done my weekly maintenance, which means I haven't moved my seedlings into the grow out beds. And I'm kind of out of room until I get I'm putting an aquarium into the system and adding some trays for that to grow more lettuce and more seedlings. And so I've been getting lettuce off what's there, but it's getting long in the tooth. And then I have a bunch of lettuces I need to transplant from the germination tray into the seedling tray. Just gonna say the transplant schedule is really important. I actually had 2 trays of seedlings going. One told me to sod off and has given up. I have like 2 plants left in that. The other one's like, the reason we're looking sad, Nicole, is you haven't moved us and we're not getting enough oxygen and nutrients. So today, in the afternoon, because I'm scheduled till about noon today, I'm totally going to make sure I take care of that and get my next trays set up. As we build the latest 3.0 version of the indoor lettuce grow operation / seedling grow operation, I will be sharing videos. Sometimes, guys, especially on this topic, I am uploading those to Odyssey, to my Odyssey channel, which is Living Free in Tennessee on Odyssey, ODYSEE, rather than YouTube, because I want to support that decentralized platform over the censorship platforms. And that's just a change we've been making here. Okay, next segment is Operation Independence. This is where we talk about building ongoing stable revenue into your life and setting things up so that you don't have to call a guy. And this is where I'm going to review the Independence Fund. The Independence Fund is a game that I play when I'm able to do something that keeps me from spending money that I don't really need to spend. And I like to say the ROI has to be there. Now, I have a bathroom. I have 2 bathrooms in this house. One bathroom's been out of commission for like a year. And the reason it's out of commission is I've hung drywall, but the mud work needs to be done. And I don't really like to do drywall mud work. And so I decided in January, I am going to get this done come hell or high water. I don't like mud work. Don't do things you don't like. So I put out feelers for a bid. And one guy came over, bid me $180. I was like, hired. And then he did what a lot of people do. Never showed up. One time he communicated with me and said, I can't get there by the end of the day. I'll be there tomorrow. Then I never heard from him again. And then at some point I sent him a note saying, no hard feelings, but I'm going to bid it out again. So I put the message out again on our community board. Looking for drywall bids. I get like 15. I'm like, this is what happened. People flaked out on me. I get like 15 people. And then once again, out of those, 3 of them agreed to come look at it. One never showed up and never contacted me. One said, hey, it's icy. I'll get out there after it's icy. One just decided to bid it without looking at it. And then that icy guy eventually was like, what are the measurements? And he bid it without looking at it. So I got 2 bids. One bid was for $400 just to do mud, guys. To do mud on a 3x4 foot bathroom that's only 8 feet tall. The other guy bid $450. And he's like, but I'll get it done in a day. I'm like, great. It's still too much money. Like if it had been $250, I would have totally gone for it. But because it's like $450 at that point, and I was talking to a friend yesterday and I said, well, I told the guy, like, you're totally worth what you're charging. I get it. I live out in the middle of nowhere. However, we've gone over the line that I can afford, so I'm just going to do it myself. Thank you. Because he at least was polite enough to talk to me, and it doesn't matter to him if I think it's too expensive, right? And that's what you should do, guys. When something's out of your price range, just say, you're worth it. It's out of my price range. I get it. Thank you very much. So they know where the status is. And so this weekend, I started doing the drywall. Eric Myers had the misfortune of stopping by to drop something up and off, and he got put to work helping a little bit. We were putting corners up. And at this point, I've got my first coat of mud on, which needed to be done before taping because there were some gaps that were too big in how the drywall was hung. And now once a day for the rest of the week, guess what I'm doing? Drywall mud. So today, this afternoon, I'll do the taping and the first real coat of mud in drywall terms. And then I'll be wet sanding because that's way better than dry sanding and getting it coated. And hopefully, knock on wood, I get this done in 2 coats and less than 3 hours of time. If that happens, then I get to put $400 in my independence fund that I did not spend on drywall and only 3 hours of my time. And that's what I mean by ROI. At that point, I'm paying myself like $133 an hour. And add 30% to that, it's $175 an hour because I didn't have to earn that 30% more, pay the taxes before I had the money, and then pay the guy to do the work. So that's all happening. So my Operation Independence this week is literally just drywall. And as much as I don't like it, I'm going to eat that frog because I know how to eat that frog. I've done a lot of drywall mud over the years. Don't like it. That's why I usually hire it out. And the other thing is these guys who didn't come out, I have a 1,600 square foot ceiling that needs to be hung. That's fairly easy drywall work. I was going to have them bid that too, but I wanted to see if they show up because, when you dangle a big job out there, people show up at first and then they disappear. If you have a kind of smallish job and they show up and do a good job, it starts establishing trust for me. And then we look at the bigger jobs. So they totally kind of cut off their noses to spite their face, so to speak. With that, it's time for the main topic of today's show. It's the reason you've tuned in. It's the 8 hacks to productivity. And it goes back to my 3 things. So if you're new to the podcast, I like to organize my life around one strategic objective, and it's a lifestyle objective, not necessarily a work objective. Work supports that, though. I believe if you can find something you love to do and make that part of your lifestyle, because then you'll love going to work, right? And then you're not spending all that time at work not loving what you do. I do know people who will do something they don't really like to do, but they don't hate it, that makes them a whole lot of money so they can do a lot of things they'd like to do outside of that. Totally different approach, totally okay, totally works with my 3 things. From there, you have 3 areas of focus that will get you to that end goal of happy life. And under those, you have, monthly accomplishments that you need to get into place. So that's like quick Reader's Digest version of my 3 things. If you want to know more about it, I have whole episodes on it. Just go to the search bar in Living Free in Tennessee, type my 3 things, and you'll start seeing all sorts of stuff about that. Well, because of that, one of the habits I recommend is that each day you write 3 things that you're going to accomplish those. One of those might be, if you work at a convenience store, go work at that convenience store, get everything done really well so you can earn a paycheck. That's a legitimate 3 thing. I like to make sure one of those 3 things, whenever possible, is something that's moving my life towards my end goal. Okay. So it may be work on the drywall because in order to have a happy life, I need to have a happy home. In order to have a happy home, I really want a bathroom that doesn't look like a construction zone. And I'm adding money to my independence fund. So it helps me with my financial goals, right? So that's a way to do it. If you have a really busy day though, and your primary objective is get the carport built for the event, that can be one thing. And you can have 1 3 thing that's how we say that. You have 1 3 thing. So my 3 things, these 3 things are my 3 things. You can't have 4. You can have fewer than 3, but you cannot have more than 3. And that's because it is very hard for your brain to really balance too many things at one time. And the purpose of my 3 things isn't that you only do 3 things a day. It is that You do up to 3 do or die things a day, and once those are done, you got that accomplishment, and that's how you move towards your life goal one step at a time rather than not moving at all because it looks like just too big and too much to do, right? So, with that in mind, I was growing last year. I was using that method. I get up every morning, write my 3 things, share it with y'all on social. We share back and forth. We should totally get back into doing that, by the way. I've just been on a bit of a social media diet, and it worked really well for me. I grew last year. Like, my business grew, I grew as a person. I actually literally grew as a person, unfortunately. Um, and it got me to a new place, but one of the things about where it got me was that I was not establishing balance, and so I started, listening to advisors. I started examining where I'm spending time, and then I started trying some fairly dramatic changes. One of my dramatic changes is there's 1 day a week that's technically a work day that I do my best not to schedule things on it. If there's an emergency, I schedule something on it. But basically, my goal is 4 days where I work really flippin' hard. And then that 1 day in the middle of the week where whatever, it's going to be homestead stuff. Basically, I get to do what I want. And then the weekend, I do personal things and homestead stuff. And what that means from client interaction standpoint is, in general, I'm no longer answering emails on the weekends because it seems very easy to answer an email real quick, but when people get the email reply and it requires more information from them, they feel inclined to answer. And pretty soon you just spent your whole Saturday doing email instead of putting your spring garden beds in, right? So here are the 8 things that I have boiled down. And the first one is a change I made last fall that made a huge difference in how my days go. I hear people complain that here's the problem I was solving. I started my day, stuff happened, I got to the end of the day, and then I looked at that to-do list I wrote in the morning and thought, now I got to start my 3 things. Now I got to start the other to-do items I got to do, right? Days like that happen. If days like that happen every day for you, it's time to rethink your life. And the way I did it, and it came from going to counseling for something completely unrelated. I think it's important to invest in your mental health. And I needed a mental health coach last fall to help me work through some things that have happened in the last few years, probably my whole life, really. Um, and so she started asking me at night to journal about my day. And it was with that goal of emotional stuff. But here's what really started happening. At the end of the day, I would journal, and then my brain would start thinking, and tomorrow I need to X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And so I started doing the journal exercise and then writing tomorrow and then listing the things that were important for tomorrow. And then when I went to bed, I could sleep. And then when I got up, I'd look at that list again and change it if I needed to. But my first tip for productivity is plan ahead, right? So do take time to journal the day. And it doesn't have to be big emotional stuff. It could literally be, well, that didn't go so well, or well, that went really well, and here's why. But just sort of reflect on your day, write whatever you want to, and then take that next step and game your day. You may already know that you have 4 meetings. I have 4 meetings on my schedule tomorrow. It's not very usual I have 4 meetings on my schedule, but I have them tomorrow. And that means knowing that today, I can't commit to anything tomorrow, really. It would be very difficult for me to commit to anything because 4 meetings require 4 meeting preps and follow up. One of them I need to drive to and back. And before I go into those, I need to have thought about what's happening, right? So part of what I'm doing today after in the afternoon is thinking about those meetings tomorrow. So I'm prepped for all 4 meetings and I don't walk in and be like, oh, hey, I'm going to waste your time now. Not cool. So plan the next day, the day before. If you get really good at this, you might be able to plan your whole week on a Sunday, for example. Personally, for me, what works for me is journaling at the end of the day, making time for that when I'm still awake and not totally like fried. And then putting the daily schedule in there. Okay. Well, how do you plan your day? My second tip is to eat the frogs first. And a concept I like to talk about is when you have things on your to do list, um, make sure that you think about, like, there's often the one thing that floats from day to day to day to day. And it's usually something like, write up the website development plans for these two projects. That's something I'll put off. It's not that I don't like doing 'em, but I don't love doing them. But a better example would be my monthly finance coding. You guys all know I don't like coding. That's a frog. And sometimes you just got to eat your frog to go ahead, right? And so we call it eating the frog. So when you're planning your day, if there's something that you're like, oh, that's so big, it's overwhelming me, or oh, that's really important, but I hate it, or once I get that done, it opens up all these other people who work for me to do stuff. Do that first. So in the journaling process, eat your frogs first. Don't eat frogs all day though. That's the thing. So my second tip is eat your frogs first, which means put those things that are most difficult for you to think about getting done at the beginning of your day, because once that's done, you've opened up your whole day. And I see somebody saying here on YouTube, productivity hack numero uno, don't watch YouTube while building Nicole's carport. Ken, I hope that didn't mess up the roof. Just kidding. He's outside working on the carport, so we have an awesome event space. Okay, third tip. This one was hard, and it involves this little device that I carry in my pocket. And when somebody wants to reach me, it rings, or it sends a ding message for my texts, and I can look at social media on it. I can pop it open and look at what's going on in the news. It's called a cell phone. Do you know what I do with my cell phone? Particularly when I'm like, oh, I'm waiting in line and I got 2 minutes while I wait in line. Here's what I do. I pop up email and I look at it. And if there's something there that's complicated, then I basically say mental note to self, follow up on that later. If it's something really easy, I'll answer. What happens as a result of that from time to time is that I forget to follow up. Okay, not from time to time. I forget to follow up a lot. And it's because I've made that mental note to follow up. The email is marked as read. I have 2,000 emails in my inbox. Not proud of it. Working on that right now. But it gets lost. And then I totally drop the ball on things. And I don't want to be that person. So I thought long and hard about this on my drive to Firon and back, about this little device and how it frees me up to travel and to interact with people digitally. And I made a really stark decision. Tip number 3, don't check email on your phone. But Nicole, I need to be responsive to people all the time. Make time in your day, a couple times a day, to check email and set a timer for an hour and check the email and deal with them all the way, one at a time. But if you check it on your phone, you fall into that trap. You fall into 2 traps. One, you start reacting to things back and forth rather than doing what you're supposed to be focusing on. 2, you might do what I do. Make a mental note to follow up on that because it's complicated. Never follow up, right? This was very hard for me emotionally to decide to do because I have coffee clients. Sometimes there are problems with orders. Eventually, I'll be big enough I can outsource some of the basic customer handling, like, oops, it charged me and I want a refund. I handle those right now, but somebody else could just as easily refund money to somebody for an order that they didn't mean to put in, right? So, I finally just thought, out of the scale of emergencies, what happens to me via email, if I don't answer right away, occasionally somebody might be a little frustrated that I didn't answer right away. But if the net gain is that people are getting answers from me rather than some people are getting answers from me, then it is a better practice for me to make myself disciplined and group all of that activity into one place. Make sure that things are marked unread that are unread so I can go through email one at a time. and deal with things one at a time. And this is because multitasking is a fiction, right? Even people who are good at multitasking, when they look at what they're doing, their brain is switching from one task to another. So it's just scattered. And if you're constantly in that state, it's not good. Being in that state sometimes for me is good because that's when I come up with creative ideas. But being in that state all the time leads to me not doing something important. Like this morning, I spent 2 hours packaging really important projects that my company's working on, for which I work with 4 other people on some of these projects in a way that everybody can know what's going on based on the resource documents I put together. And then they don't have to call me and ask me questions. And they're not stuck behind, I don't know what to do because Nicole hasn't told me, right? So I traded off email on my phone, scheduled into my day, checking email. It's not actually at the same time every day. I just listen to 4-Hour Work Week, and he does it same time, same day sort of thing. I'm not that organized right now, but I do make sure I get at least 1, if not 2 hours a day of email. And already the feedback I'm getting from people who work with me is this is so much better because you're answering things all the time. So think long and hard before you do it, but think about, do you really need email on your phone? And you can put an autoresponder, like call my cell phone if it's an emergency, right? If this is an emergency that can't wait till I check email at 5 o'clock or whenever you check it, which is a tip from 4-Hour Work Week, call my cell phone. And then sometimes you'll find people call your cell phone who don't have an emergency. You got to train people not to do that to you. One way I train people not to do that to me is I don't actually answer my phone every time it rings. If I don't know who you are and the number comes in, I'm going to let it go to voicemail. If you did not leave a voicemail message, it was not important, or follow it up with a text about what it's about. And that also is huge. It's not a tip. It's just what I do. I think a lot of people do that. Okay. Tip number 4, schedule your time. 6 a.m. to 12 is my time. So schedule that morning productivity time from when you get up to when you're going to take a pause, really, and bang out as much as you can in that time. Okay. For me, that time is 6 a.m. to 11 or 12. Okay. 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. For you, you may be one of those people who your best productivity time is 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Whatever that is, my 6 hours, my best 6 hours of the day are from when I get up, and I've been pushing my get up a little early, is 6 a.m. to noon. And in that time, I include time for self-improvement and self-care, meaning like stretching, taking a bath, because I like to relax in the bathtub, getting my nonfiction reading done, which is educational for me. That's a time when my brain works. Okay. So schedule that time. The way I'll do it is I'll be like 6 to 6:30 this, 6:30 to 7 that, 7 to 7:30 that, 7:30 to 8 that. And then actually I went 7:30 to 9:30 those projects because that was the frog I needed to eat today. And then 9:30 to 11 is podcast recording. That's my 6 a.m. to 11. And I bang that all out. And I do not waver from that if I do not have to. Of course, if an emergency comes up, like Ken hurts himself when he's out there working on the carport and falls off the ladder, and I'm going to stop that schedule and figure things out. But having that time uninterrupted and being fearless about that has allowed me to do almost a full day's work in less than 6 hours every day since I started doing it. Every day. And you know why? Because I'm not getting interrupted. You know what's not on that list? Checking email. I don't look at email in the morning anymore. Don't do it. Today, I accidentally had to open email to get a project going that was important. And I almost started looking at email. I'm like, I see the emails there, but I do not see the emails. Okay. So, if your time of day, as I said, it starts at 2 p.m., just make sure that's scheduled and be fearless about protecting it. Don't take meetings during that time and just bang it out. Okay. And as you get into this, here's what will happen. You will learn a couple of things. One, you either need more or less time to do some of the things that are important. For me, printing coffee labels It can take half an hour, it can take 2 hours. The more I'm interrupted, the longer it takes me. And the more I'm interrupted, the more likely it is I'm going to mail you ground coffee instead of whole bean coffee or something silly like that, or print a label that's the wrong size box or whatever the mistakes could be. And that means if I don't get interrupted for labels, I can allocate half an hour and it works unless it's a weird day. Well, the only reason I know that is I originally allocated an hour for that and it didn't take me an hour. And then 45 minutes and it didn't take me 45 minutes. And then half an hour and it took me half an hour. That's the power of scheduling that time and blocking the time. What I do when I've scheduled a day and it doesn't take me as long is I take that extra time and I have a coffee break. Drinking coffee right now. It's hollow roast. Yum. And think about what I'm going to do differently the next day. But my goal is to not always have a bunch of coffee breaks in that time. My goal is to beat feet through it, to actually schedule a coffee break in there because I do want a morning coffee break and get it done. And then before noon or by about noon, I know I've done everything that's absolutely the most important for the day because it's the absolute most important stuff I put there unless for some reason it has to be scheduled later in the day. Like it's an interview show and I need to do the interview after 12 or whatever it is. Like those are my exceptions. And then I have a reward system I've put in place. And I've put a lot of thought into rewards because I used to reward myself at the end of the day with an alcoholic beverage or some chocolate. And it's always been something I eat. And then I go, I can relax. Well, now my rewards are different. Friday, I had one of the most aggressive roasting days I've had since the Christmas rush because like the culmination of the ice storm and everything else resulted in a lot of orders needing to go out on Friday last week. And I pre-gamed the whole thing. I had my whole roasting schedule done. I knew what I was going to do Friday, and I had pre-recorded my podcast on Thursday. So I jumped in and I was like, my reward for this, if I get done early enough, is I get to go swim laps at the pool. So for me, swimming laps at the pool is a really good mental as well as physical release. It allows my brain to focus because I'm thinking about swimming and it's good for my body. And my body's been really like structurally out of whack. And part of that is I haven't been swimming laps for about a year because of shutdowns. And I hadn't figured out what it looked like to start swimming again in a post-COVID world with weird mask regulations. So I called and I was informed that masks are not mandatory in the pool. They are optional though. And I like laughed for I'm still laughing about it. Like, who wears a mask in the pool? By the way, answer to that is nobody swimming laps in the pool was wearing a mask. I don't even know how you do that. Like it'd be like waterboarding yourself. Anyway, so my reward on Friday was I got to go swim laps. And I'm starting to set up a series of rewards like that are things I like to do that I'm going to do anyway if I want to, but it's like my reward for this is I get to go do something active or I get to go do something in the garden or I get to go do something fun. And that's been working really well to keep me to that scheduled time, not get distracted and bang stuff out. Okay. Tip number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It'd be really good if I would have written numbers next to my tips. Fight interruption like the plague. And now that you've been through a pandemic, you know how to fight the plague, right? Interruption causes your brain to stop thinking about what you're working on. And sometimes interruptions are important. Most of the time, they're not. Sometimes we allow interruptions as a way to procrastinate because what we're doing is kind of overwhelming. And so we're like, I'll just look at the news. I'll just hop on social. I'll just get myself another cup of coffee. I'll just go see what the neighbors are doing down at base camp with that ditch, whatever it is. Like, I can't tell you, it's not 11 o'clock yet. I've really wanted to go out and check progress like 19 times. I did check progress when I had to walk by on my way to get my clipboard for roasting schedule. But I have kept myself from going out there and being interrupted during my productivity time because the most important thing after having spent the time and invested thought into scheduling my day is to do that if I can. And 95% of the time, I can. And 5% of the time, there's an emergency that requires my attention. Okay? So fight interruption like the plague. Interruption can be interruption from your animals, from your kids, from your spouse, from your friends, from people stopping by to deliver packages. It can be interruptions that you do to yourself by letting notices hit your computer. I've turned off all notices on my computer. I logged out of Telegram so I wouldn't know what they were talking about. All of that stuff is off. And now when I concentrate, and then I go look at those things. I do not get Facebook message notifications anymore. It's all gone. And fighting that interruption will make you way more productive. And sometimes you think, well, I have to be interruptible. My phone is in the other room on the charger because I'm recording this podcast and I'm not going to go look at text messages during this podcast, right? If I can do that for an hour, you can do that for an hour. That doesn't mean you just go into do not disturb mode all day long. Like when I'm in my productivity hours, you can get me by text message because people who text message me usually have an urgency. That's what text message is for. If you are trying to give me information that I need to digest in text message or Telegram or Signal, I will forget it. So just know that, right? Email is where you send me things I need to actually absorb. Text message is, hey, are we getting together next Friday? Or did you see that article on whatever, right? If it's, did you see that article? I may or may not answer you because that's not my big focus. But if it's, hey, are we getting together Saturday at 9? Then I'm be like, yeah, we're getting together Saturday at 9. Or, hey, Nicole, do you know what time you're going to be at, Big Rock Cafe? Well, I'm going to be at Big Rock Cafe at this time. That's what text message is for me. And little frivolous things like that, I still won't answer till later in the day. If it's an important thing, like I'm at the bank and they need your password for X, then, I figured, why would I be sending passwords in text message? But you know what I mean, right? It's just an example I made up off the top of my head. So fight interruption like the plague. Okay, number 7. This one's important. This one takes time. This one takes practice. This one I'm still working on. Seek to drive all communication to a conclusion. We communicate with each other a lot just to communicate. And we communicate incompletely because we are not very disciplined about it. And so something like an email will come through that requires an answer to something, and then I answered it, and then it raises another question that gets asked, and then I answer that, and I ask a question because now that raised. You see how that goes? Sometimes that kind of back and forth is necessary. But if you are looking to increase productivity in your life, you want to start leading your conversations and your emails and your text messages towards a conclusion that has clarity of who has the ball. Do you have the ball and you're moving forward, or do I have the ball and am I moving forward? If you have the ball, have I empowered you enough to get it done all the way, or are you going to need to come back to me today? I work with different vendors on websites, and I'm trying a new process with one of them today where the work order that we have for a piece of the project lists everything that needs to be done on it, links with, resources that are important to get that done all in one place so that that person can go through one at a time and not have to ask me questions. That's an example of driving all communication to a conclusion. Ball is in his court. I think I've given him all the information he needs. If I haven't, he will come back to me and we will write it into this document because this is a style of project he does for me all the time. And that will become a template so that if I'm on the road and I give him one of these and then I'm in sessions for a whole day or two and he can't ask me questions, he can still get that done, right? That's good for him and for me. He makes money. I make money. Like, it's a good thing. Another thing I started doing this year, just with this in mind, was people go to my guest form and they fill out the guest form. And I used to have Mama Sauce reach out and schedule it. And there'd be a lot of back and forth on which day. And then the meeting would get scheduled and they may or may not know how to do like the Zoom process and all of that. Well, I took that back from her, not because she can't do it. She totally can, but because it seemed like an unnecessary use of her time when I can use an automation tool to fix things. And I used an automation tool called Calendly, where I have set certain days of the week and times that people can do an interview with me. It's not just one day, one time, which is what I used to do. And then I send them an email saying, "Hey, during this week, choose a time. If that doesn't work, go to the next week." And the purpose of that kind of communication is that I've told them what I want them to do. I've told them what happens if that doesn't work so that they can eventually get a time. I've given them the tool to finish the entire scheduling process. And at the end of that day, they get a calendar request with the link to the Zoom call. And all I had to do was send that first email, and they just have to choose the time. And then until the day we talk, that's all that's needed, right? That's all that's needed. Did the same thing with a new website project with my other vendor. I was like, hey, this is the tick list of what needs to be done. If you need to talk to me about this, here's the link to schedule a call so that we can go over it. This is the agenda of what we'll go over. Boom, shows up on my calendar. I didn't have to have 6 emails choosing which day of the week and what time. So, driving all communications to a conclusion where it's clear who has accountability and you have a backup plan. Like, you think about it like, I have a backup plan if they can't do this thing, helps reduce your email traffic and helps move things along faster. Everybody wins, right? And that brings us to my next productivity advice: use tools. It's number 7. My hack for keeping things going is find automating tools that will work for your process. A tool I use is Calendly. Calendly costs me like $17 a month, and it allows me to have various kinds of meetings with openings at different times of day. It checks my digital calendar before it offers time. So if I have a doctor's appointment that I put on Monday, and Monday was a time when you could schedule with me, it won't give you that time slot. And when I put an appointment like that on my calendar, I include drive time so that we don't have the unfortunate happening where I'm supposed to be on a Zoom call while driving to a doctor's appointment. It doing all that for me eliminates so much wasted time trying to schedule stuff. Included in Calendly, I can ask people questions before they talk to me. So if I have a new customer call, it asks them in advance, what are we talking about? This kind of, and what resources do I need to look at before the call? This allows us to have an effective call where we're able to knock out what they're looking for, and I come in informed, rather than the first call is, oh yeah, you need to look at this stuff. Then I go look at the stuff and I have a second call. Okay. So use the tools that are available for you. Don't shy away from technology just because you don't like it. Technology can really make things better. For me, the Calendly and Zoom combination has been great. That doesn't mean it's the end all be all, and it doesn't mean that's a good combination for you. The caveat with using tools to make your life better: don't use all the tools. You know that meme with the guy with its like the little stick figure going, all the things, all the tools. Not a good idea. You can over tool yourself and you can over automate yourself. You need to really think about your workflow and those things that need to get done and those things that require repeated touch. And then see, is there a tool that can help me with that? Is there a tool that's very easy to use? Like Calendly, you don't have to have Calendly to use Calendly. That's why I like Calendly. It just says, choose a time, answer these questions, and it sends you a meeting request. And if you don't have a digital calendar on the other side of that meeting request, you have a summary email. If you do, it'll go straight into your calendar. I don't care what tools you use on your side. Calendly makes it so you don't conflict on my schedule, and it gives you all the information you need for the meeting in several formats, right? I also use a system called Trello for project management that none of my customers ever look at. And that's fine. That's something that works between Mama Sauce and me. We're the only two who look at that. It makes us have a quick idea, dashboard of status. If I wanted to be terrible and mean, I would make my customers use that and enter their names and phone numbers and all of that stuff, and it would save me time. I don't want to do that to my customers, right? So if you're going to tool up, don't over tool yourself. Add tools one at a time, add them for a specific purpose. Test them out before you go full bore on them. Look at other people who are using tools that you think, yep, I need that one. And then implement them carefully, and they can really empower you to be way more productive. I think taking out that back and forth, for me, that back and forth on calendar has been a huge deal. And I've tried it so many ways. At one point, 2 times in my life, I've paid people to put stuff on my calendar for me, and inevitably it was problematic. Calendly just does it. It just happens. And it's not afraid of if it's overwhelming me or not, right? I can set parameters about how many appointments a day I even want. And that's kind of cool. So think about that. So make sure, I've probably said this 9 times, make sure you don't overdo it though. You don't want to be that guy who's like, I've got the latest new tool. Don't be that guy. And then my last tip for productivity, this one's probably the most important one. Never give up. What do I mean by that? Well, in order to be productive and to knock out your most important things, you have to decide to be productive and knock out your most important things. And that means you have to decide that's more important than keeping up on the news, or that's more important than staying logged into Zello and keeping up with your Zello friends. I log into Zello on a schedule. I don't stay on all the time because I need to not be interrupted at certain times of the day, for example. It means it needs to be more important to you to do those important things than anything else. And included in those important things need to be important things to you, not just to your job or work or household management. Okay. If yoga is something you need to do, that's an important thing. What we tend to do is allow ourselves to get distracted because it feels good. We pop on a movie when we really shouldn't, or we check the news because we're standing in line, and then we get all distracted by whatever the latest crisis of the day is. And if you notice, there's basically a new crisis every day or outrage of the day. And we focus there instead of what's really important to get done. A friend of mine said, I said this the other day, Ryan Steva, he was like, rather than fight the things you hate, build something you love, right? That's the same thing. Don't give up. Don't give up on your goals. Don't give up on your dreams. Don't give up on what you want to accomplish. I wrote these podcast notes last night at 8 p.m. because I looked at my first 2 days of the week and it's completely booked with appointments. And I knew if I didn't come into Monday with this ready to go, the podcast would be really hard to produce. And it's very important that I do this on a schedule, right? And then I delegated some things related to projects at 8 p.m. on Wednesday last week. Same thing. I find myself from time to time doing about a half hour work at 8 p.m. That's because I'm not going to give up on the important projects. At the same time, I'm not going to give up on walking my dogs. And I walk my dogs during daylight, right? I could have had that all done before 8 p.m. Wednesday, but instead I took the dogs for a walk and then knew that in order to get this done for the day, there was going to be a little bit of a work session. So setting those times when you do things without interruption is important, and productivity is important, and productivity includes downtime. Don't give up, but also include downtime. So those are my hacks. What are your hacks? I'd love to hear them. If you have some hacks about how you're able to knock out more and have a little bit more free time now and then. If you have any hacks, you can email me, Nicole at Living Free in Tennessee, or just throw it in the comments of the show notes at Living Free in Tennessee. If you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing, you can do it in 2 ways. 1, get your coffee at hollerroast.com. 2, go over to Living Free in Tennessee and consider becoming a member. Membership gives you access to webinars. We've started those up again. The next webinar is going to be on Saturday at 2 p.m. Central. It's going to be all about pantry management practices. And if you're on the live webinar, you can ask me questions. We record them and upload them to the membership portal as well. So that's the biggest benefit there. There's also a recipe of the week that comes out. We're going to start doing those publicly as well. You have downloads of manuals like my cookbook, Cook With What You Have. We're about to add a chicken processing manual up there. We've already added the pig processing manual. So we're starting to get a set of resources for you, especially those of you who are looking for that more self-reliant lifestyle. Anyway, with that, guys, go out, make it a great week. I have stopped the recording, Michael. Hello, Michael. How are you doing? Hey, YouTubers, thanks for joining in. Hope you liked that one. It'll be interesting to see what other productivity hacks people have. Those are mine. And pray your tape doesn't bubble. Oh, yeah. Hat. My tape does not bubble. But yes, that's just because I've unfortunately done a lot of drywall mud. My favorite, not my favorite. John, thanks for joining in, guys. We'll have this podcast out. Supposed to be by 11, but I've slipped half an hour today, so it's going to be 11:30.